thing's kind of freaky, isn't it? It's like if you took a Praxis wet bench and then Thermaltake P5 and just and there you go. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So today we're going to be looking at something from CoolerMaster. Now, this is kind of embarrassing, but I have never actually purchased a CoolerMaster product. So what are we going to add to my collection today? Well, it is this. Oh my goodness. It's the MasterFrame 700. So who is the target audience for this case, and why does it look like this when it arrives? Well, that's because it's all flat packed inside of here. You have to assemble everything yourself, and that kind of fits the theme with what this is intended for. And that is a sort of hybrid between an open air chassis and a test bench, combining both worlds into one very nicely made case. Now, because this isn't fully assembled, I'm not going to bore you guys with an unboxing. And because I have to assemble it myself, what does that mean? A build montage. Roll it! So I've got this thing configured for the display mode that it has. If you wanted to do a test bench mode, all you'd have to do is obviously take the glass off because you don't need that while you're testing. Take these bars that hold the glass in, flip them to the back side, and those become your feet. Then your radiators can mount kind of in a downward angle. That would be your test bench mode. So what I've done is I've just thrown in this X570 board here. That's a regular ATX board. 2060 Super graphics card. It is a mini version, so that doesn't really give a lot of scale, but my 2080 Ti is water cooled over there, and I don't want to take that apart and put the regular cooler and back in here. So just keep in mind that's a little bit shorter than usual. So this thing can take a massive amount of storage. In the back you have slots for 3 kind of angled 2.5 inch SSDs. It can also accommodate 4 full-size 3.5 inch spinning hard drives. Or of course you can mount the 2.5s in there as well. But it does have space for 4 drives if you want to do some kind of crazy RAID setup, which is nice. Again, if you're doing a test bench, you can set up your RAID and everything on the bench before flipping this around, getting everything nice and neat, and then mounting it on your wall if you wanted to do that, because this is wall mountable in a certain configuration. Now what you have to do for that is your power supply goes from down back on the side here over and mounts on one of these wings, and this back bracket that usually holds your hard drives gets removed so that it can be flush mounted on the wall. And I'm guessing it's because this back structure here that holds the hard drives is not load bearing. If you were to put all of this weight onto that little piece of metal, it would just pancake. So like I mentioned, this is an ATX board. It also supports out to an eATX and SSI EEB, which is like a 14-inch by 14-inch board. That can be supported as well. Now what that does do is it takes up your space for your pump and radiator, or not radiator, your pump and reservoir, but we're not using that here. And I will be adding 2 360mm radiators, one on each side here, and then water cooling this whole system before attempting to mount it on my wall there. We're gonna see how that goes. If you wanna see that video, go ahead and subscribe. That way you'll get notified once I drop it. So the main question is, who is this for? Who would wanna buy this $200 piece of metal and glass? And the answer to that is, well, it's going to be a unique segment of people that are looking for something as specific as this. It is a display case, but it's not meant to be something like the Thermaltake P series, which are solely display cases, open air. Those are kind of showpieces, and that's it. This is two birds with one stone, so you do get the open air test bench as well. Now, for people like me, that is fantastic because I have a lot of different coolers I like to test out. I like to do some pretty heavy overclocking, and being able to use one case for test benching, and then once I finally find a configuration that I like, throw it up on the wall and display it. Being able to do those two different things makes this a fantastic choice for me. Now, will it be a great choice for you? Well, it depends on your needs. Now, the fit and finish of this thing is fantastic. It is made of very thick metal that is extremely sturdy. These hinges are incredibly robust, and you can tell by the paint on it, it's a pretty high quality paint job. It doesn't show fingerprints very easily, doesn't scuff, and it just looks nice with kind of that matte finish on there. One thing to note is that that paint definitely got into a lot of the threads, making it a little bit difficult for some of the screws to get started. You just kind of have to push them in as you're going. So a lot of these thumb screws, which most of the assembly is with thumb screws, they don't go in right away, but once you work them back and forth, it takes care of that. This does have support for 2 power supplies, although if you do have 3.5-inch drives all stacked up in the back here, you're kind of limited on the power supply that you could use. You might have to use something like a SFX power supply and then push your drives all the way to the side. Now, this does support 2 360mm radiators on the wings here. I mean, technically, I guess you could go a little bit bigger and just go higher for like 2 480s, but it is intended to be 360mm mounted on each one. It does have brackets that hang off in test bench mode to mount a third radiator if you want, or the longer 480. It's got some pretty decent I/O here that is movable depending on your configuration. It's got a power button, it's got 2 USB-A and 1 USB-C, as well as a headphone jack, so that's kind of nice. And around back here you have, well, unlimited space for cable management. There are some nice Velcro straps that are included, and they have nice tie-off points, and they are secured there so you can cinch up all of your cables. So the build that I'm going to be doing with this one is going to be the X570 board right here, which is the ROG Strix, and that is going to be for a 5950X, as well as a 3090 that I have coming that I'm going to be water cooling, both the graphics card and a monoblock on there from EK Water Blocks. Now, what I plan on doing, hopefully, is putting hardline tubing that has pivot points so I can move these back and forth. Now, initial testing and everything, of course, is going to be with soft tubing to make sure everything works. But if it's possible, I would like to have hardline water cooling on this. Now, if you do decide to get this, you have to be aware that if you do hardline tubing, any movement with this means you have movement between your radiator and your other components. So that is a possible point of leakage. Now, one thing to note is that this does not come assembled like this. You have to do it all yourself. But the instructions are very clear, and it went together in about 45 minutes. And it will be probably less time for you because most of that was me setting up my camera to get those B-roll shots. One nice thing about this whole setup is that everything is assembled with thumb screws, and that includes the radiators. So you'll be assembling those from the back here. The graphics card is thumb screw, the PSU is attached to the frame using thumb screws, all the hard drives have thumb screws, and even the glass mounting is with thumb screws here. So it's kind of a theme throughout, and it does make for changing everything or swapping out components a little bit easier. So is this worth the $200 that you're gonna spend on it? Oh, I think absolutely, because if you were to go for a Praxis wet bench, well, that's $200 right there. And that's only a test bench. You can't really display all of your glorious hardware in it. And if you were to go with something like a Thermaltake P5, well, that's $140. So you don't get a test bench with it. It's only for displaying, and it's just an open air chassis. So this kind of combines both worlds without having the price of purchasing both. So yes, I absolutely think that this is a good value. The components are top notch for it. The assembly is quick, instructions are great, and it's so nice to have this glorious piece of tempered glass out in front. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. This is a fantastic option if you're looking for a kind of hybrid case that displays everything, but also can be converted into a test bench so you can test all of your components. It is kind of a unique market, but for me, it was really refreshing to see this combination at a decent price. So stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to be doing a pretty hefty build with this, with the 5950X and a 3090, and then water cooling it and overclocking the crap out of it. So go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell icon, that way you get notified when I release that video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.